Greetings, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Way of the Showman, where we view the world through the lens of showmanship. I am Captain Frodo, and I will be your gracious host and guide along the way. And today we have an interview, or a conversational episode again. We haven't had that since I spoke to Jay Gilligan in episode 41, and I worked with him for a long time, but the man that I am, the showman that I'm going to talk to today, Morgan James, also known as Scooby, is from Western Australia, and he contacted me towards the end of the last year, in September I think we started to talk, and then spoke many times from then on in, and it was very interesting because he was also was working on a show very different than Jay, which was working on a very much sort of adult, everything coming together in one big artistic kind of thing, whilst the show that we created for Morgan James was called A One Man Circus, and it's a family show. And those of you who are faithful listeners to the podcast knows that I do dabble quite a lot in shows for families, shows that are not just kid shows that you call family shows, but shows that are really exciting and funny and engaging for adults as well as kids. Morgan contacted me and said he was interested in working with me on a show that he was going to self-produce for the Perth Fringe Festival in January 2022. So, as we will hear from the interview, COVID comes to Western Australia later than it did to the rest of the world, and the run had its complications as a result of that, but the process that we went through was really quite remarkable, and I found myself as we were going through this process that I kept thinking that, now I have a grasp on what it was that we wanted to do over the first bunch of sessions. I was going, now I know what the show is, and this is how it's going to be, a sequence of nice images, and it's building towards this emotional and important thing that he wants to sort of get across to the audience. But then it just kept expanding, and all the way until the very end it kept expanding and contracting and expanding and contracting in terms of deepening the connections, and it was a very rewarding process. And along the way of chatting about shows, we also realized that we both have a passionate and deep love for Star Wars. I don't know if I have spoken much about that on the podcast before, but this interview started with us talking about Star Wars for about 15 minutes or so. So maybe I'll post that once I get Patreon site or on my buymeacoffee.com Captain Frodo site, and you can get it as a additional extra for all those of you who are lovers of the Star Wars universe. But anyway, as this episode starts, it has been truncated a little bit to be a little bit less about there were spoilers and everything for the current Obi-Wan Kenobi season, which is still coming out. So there is some references to Star Wars in the very beginning here, and just know that me and him have been at it for some time when you, beautiful listener, step into this conversation. So here it is, me and Morgan James. I believe that there is a lot more to what we do than just the tricks, and I am, and I guess our collaboration on working on a show was also that. It's like you're already a proficient showman and you perform and you have something that's working, but at some point in one's life we often ask, okay, is there something more that we can do with this? And that's looking at how the Jedi, like, they have these special powers, but you can use them in lots of different ways, but like what is beyond the fact that you can make something levitate or you can do these things? What will you use it for? And in that way, I see like the powers of us show folk, of what happens when you get the attention of the people, and what do you do with that attention? And maybe that brings it into you and me, like, because maybe I was thinking first, maybe what's like a short sort of bio on you, just like a couple of minutes.
Well, I short little bio on me. Grew up in a military family, and instead of doing that, I became an actor, like a child actor in musicals and things like that. Loved the theater because it just seemed right. It just seemed right to be on stage, and seeing people enjoy just a performance on stage really kind of captivated me. And then so I started really heavily into theater, doing musicals and learning musical instruments and doing all that sort of stuff. My family was never really a creative bunch, so it was quite weird that there was this kid who brought home a unicycle or things like that. And then so I was in a musical, Oliver, and I think I was 11, and the director, as I was a part of Fagin's gang, the kind of street critters, and the director wanted something a little bit more happening on the stage, and he's like, "Oh, we need some buskers or something? Can anyone juggle?" And I put my hand up, and so did my friend, my circus brother Adam, and they're like, "Cool, you're in the scene." And we had no idea how to juggle, or we had we could kind of throw things up in the air. But we had no idea how to juggle, but we just wanted to have a little bit more stage time. So, I went home and had a big lemon tree in the backyard, and I just smashed so many lemons for days and days and days. And then I got some actual beanbag juggling balls, and, we went out there and performed. And I remember, like, even back in that age, a good performance, and it was just like a little bit before something happened. A good performance was 7 drops, only 7 drops today.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah, and you really think about it, I was only really on that stage doing that juggling for maybe 20 seconds or something. So I only got 7 drops in. Yeah, that's good. That's really good. But then from there, I had this kind of love of juggling, so I tried to practice more and more and more, and then I started other things like the Diablo, which I became obsessed with, and I got into unicycle. And then when I was doing all the theater stuff, I kind of started to get noticed more as, "Oh, you can ride a unicycle, right? Come and be in my show, because we need a Alice in Wonderland crazy scene with a unicycler." And it's like, "Okay, I'll come and do that." So then I started noticing that instead of just being an actor, I could be an actor and something else, like a specialty act sort of thing. And I really loved doing that because I could practice that in my own time, as opposed to just reading Shakespeare in my room. I could actually really become a part of this crazy community of superstars and superheroes. And then from there, I just kind of looked at my life and went, I think I'm going to be a circus performer. And on my 18th birthday, my dad sat me down and he said, "Happy birthday." And then he slid over a huge pack of papers across the table, and he had signed me up to military college. And I was going to be flying out to Canberra in a week. And, this was a part of the cruise ship show. And, I said, "But Dad, I'm an artist. Like, I can't go to Canberra and be in the military." So I think that was like the definitive moment where I was like, I'm not going to do anything but circus. And I've not stopped since. So now I've been performing all over the world, doing European festivals and doing the cruise ships, things like that. Well, not anymore anyway. I think my time with the cruise ships is over, even, COVID willing, but I might go back to them eventually. And now here we're doing the Fringe festivals. I also now produce and curate festivals. I've got a big one coming up in the next couple of weeks with a whole bunch of different West Australian acts that are all incredible, and I'm really, really excited to work with all of them. producing 2 shows in that festival as well, called Up Late Cabaret and WA Variety All Stars, circus family spectacular show thing.
Yeah.
And
So-
then I'm
yeah.
pushing forward. I'm going to buy a circus tent and fill it with shows and tour a circus tent around. Because why not? You know,
Why
at
not?
the end of the day, why not?
Yeah, man, that's a very exciting. And yeah, so as you mentioned, you're in Western Australia, and you guys
Mhm.
had a sort of peculiar, or maybe not peculiar, but just certainly a different kind of experience of the pandemic as well, because the pandemic came really late to
Absolutely.
Western Australia.
Well,
Like
I
it only
remember,
hit-
what was it? Not this fringe, but the fringe before, we had a lockdown, and we had a 3-day lockdown, I think, because there was potentially one active case out in Perth from a quarantine staff worker who got it somehow. And from that potential one case, I think it did end up being confirmed an actual case. We had the whole city in lockdown. So the Fringe Festival, we rocked up to do our show, and they said, "Nah, just go home. There's no shows today." And just thinking about that, with just one case, and we locked down and we kept us all safe, and it's just been this weird little bubble where it's kind of normal, but it kind of isn't normal at the same time.
Yeah.
And we were always kind of living in that unease where all you had to do was sign in with a QR code to places. You didn't have to wear a mask. You didn't have to do anything. Of course, we did have lockdowns and restrictions and all that sort of stuff, but nothing like the other parts of Australia and the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. But from that, we're all safe now. So
Yeah.
it's quote unquote life is normal, and not too much of our life was affected, like your life and everyone else's lives.
Yeah, I remember that there was because when you reached out and we began collaborating on your project, there was nothing going on really here in this end.
Yep.
I mean, it was just sort of starting to happen, but it was really sort of spread out and sporadic. Like in the beginning, when I was chatting with you, I was at home always, and then I remember there was a couple round about the time that we really brought in the old man, which we'll get to that later. Then I was talking from an airport and stuff. So I did a few of those times when I was on the road, and it felt like it was just opening up again. But you guys kind of went through that whole thing. But anyway, so you had you had a show that you've already kind of done. Because as we've just heard, you've been doing this for a long time. I mean, just a comment on that too. I find it incredibly fascinating, stories like yours, when you're coming from a military family and then you find this other thing which eventually leads you like acting or performing or being on stage. It's like I talk about that space of once you're standing there on the stage and facing the other way to all the other people, and you feel like home, more at home there than you do with all the expectations that are placed on you by your family. And on your 18th birthday, when he goes, "All right, so here's your future, sign the paper," it's such a it's like a filmic kind of moment where you go, "Here
Absolutely.
you go, you're going into the military college in one way or another, you'll be part of that thing," and then you standing up. I mean, that must have was there any friction from that?
I mean, yes and no. I was definitely a teenager, going through my rebellious stage, and going through, my education with Catholic schools and all that sort of really fun stuff that I really didn't want to do. So I decided to leave Catholic school and go to a public school, and then didn't really learn anything from that anyway. I think, when I started performing, I was doing the acting as a kid, and I was also doing quite high level trumpet playing. And that's the one thing my dad really did like, was me being a trumpet player. So he'd come to those shows, but he'd never come and see me perform on stage if it wasn't the trumpet. So I kind of always knew that. in the back of my head. But at 18, I already was well established with knowing what I wanted to do and where I was going to go. I decided probably not to go to NICA, which is the National Institute of Circus Arts over in Melbourne, just because I wanted to tour the world first.
Yeah. That's
So
really interesting.
I'd already had that show, and I mentioned Adam earlier. Adam's my circus brother. We grew up together, and we had a duo show, and that's basically where we started. We kind of bounced off each other doing that. And then, so the biggest kind of split there was that Adam then went off to be a model in LA, because he's the beautiful, tall, blonde, curly-haired, blue-eyed surfer boy from Australia. And then I was kind of left with this duo show that couldn't perform anymore. So then I had to kind of like Burt Wonderstone it a little bit with the lines. I've been magical best friends with myself for 10 years, and kind of cobble that sort of stuff together and create this show. So that was before I was 18, and I had this show that I'd had performed at small festivals and cabarets and things. So I already kind of had a trajectory. So when Dad sat me down and basically ignored who I actually was, it didn't fully affect me, because it was just like, I'm not doing that. I already knew I wasn't doing that.
This was just a conversation where you had to face the music and say, no, you might not have been paying attention, but like, this is an actual choice of mine.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think maybe that was probably his last chance to get me onto the life path that he had chosen for me. And he didn't really bring it up since. But when I got a little bit bigger and started doing bigger shows in theaters and stuff, I'd always buy him a ticket, and he'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'm coming," but he never showed up. There was always that, another movie moment. There was always that seat in the front row on stage right that was empty with a reserve sticker on it, and it's like, that's where he should have been sitting.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like he accepted that you had taken the choice of doing something else, but he didn't fully embrace it or whatever. It's like it didn't necessarily hound you about it, but still didn't carve out time in his own life to participate in this other choice that you had made.
Definitely. I think he just thought I was still just playing around, really. I was big into my music as well. So I was like this dual artist. I was a musician and I was also a circus performer. And that was quite a balance that I tried to live for a few years until I decided to be like a full-time professional circus performer. So I'd buy guitars all the time. I love my guitars. They're like works of art. And I'd bring one home and he'd be like, "Oh, cool." And I was like, "Look at this one. Like that, I got this one from America. It's the only one in Australia." He's like, "How much does that cost you?" I'm like, $1,500. And he's like, "Well, when are you going to make that money back with it?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm not going to make, I'm in a band and I don't need to make the money back. It's another guitar." So I think he had that kind of thing in his head of like, how are you going to make this into anything that's going to make a substantial impact in your life and actually live from it. And
yeah, I guess it's always connected to that. I mean, I guess that's often what maybe it's that generation, or maybe it's just a cultural thing in the West, at least here, that you equate these things with money, and you go, oh, well, if you buy that thing and it's somehow related to your work, like how is that thing going to make you money and make its investment back? But when you're an artist and you live that kind of life that we do, it's like even the hours invested in when I decide to learn a new trick or whatever, might not necessarily know what will happen from this, but I know that at some point in my youth I was walking around trying to balance a spoon on my nose and catch it behind my ear, and I did that for months, carrying it around, doing it all the time. And my dad just brought up that story that we were on some holiday and I was doing this just all the time, and that spoon was just falling on the ground through that whole holiday. And I didn't know at the time why or what or whatever, but now that is bringing money back. But it probably took I don't know, 8 years or something before I made that first routine, or 6 years or something before I made the first routine. And now I just did that in Italy now in a magic convention, and it brought the house down. What I have done with it or so, but for a decade before that routine was actually what it could be, and people would pay to make me do that in front of them. Like until then, it was just driven by the passion first.
I think that's really important as well, because you you probably didn't realize it when you started doing it, but you were training, and
Yeah.
you know, especially when you're a kid, you don't really see it that way. You're just playing. So, you know, school holidays for me, I was playing with my Diablo.
Yeah.
But I was playing with my Diablo for 8 hours a day and burning through strings every like 2 days and incessantly downloading videos off Diablo.ca, which is a Diablo forum, a Canadian Diablo forum that I was very a part of for such a long time. And going, oh my God, look at these tricks. Look at these French people doing stuff in this DVD. How could I ever do that? And then I just try and try and try. And that's one of the biggest parts of the collaboration we did with A One Man Circus, is, you know, that powerful monologue that we wrote together, where it's like, you got to try. And you know what happens when you try? You fail. But did I give up? No, I tried again and I failed. And then you keep failing and you keep failing, and then you fail a little bit less. And, you know, because I also teach circus as well, it's really, I think that's a really important lesson that circus can give, not only just for circus people, but just normal people, muggles. It's just, you know, people go, oh, wow, how'd you learn to do that? It's like, well, I practiced, I trained.
Yeah. It's so true. I remember talking to Jay about that same thing too, like him being bitten by the same kind of juggling bug, and I was in round about that age, was also just so excited about juggling and magic. But it's the same with guitar as well. It's like you're so excited by the thing in itself. So when people go, oh wow, that must have been difficult. Oh, you must be very talented. And then remember Jay saying something like, not really. I just work really hard on it, and you're just, the luck is that you are actually in the flow. You're in a happy space when you are doing that and developing, and it's just about putting the time in. But then of course it's like the only thing that we have that we can decide what to do with in our life is our what we want to do with that time and attention. Where do we place that focus? And we have been blessed with the excitement that we get, excitement and fulfillment from doing the juggling, and that's what's driven us into becoming good at these ridiculous tricks or so. But you feel like you're nothing special yet, because it's also enjoyable. I remember people often say, like, oh, back then too, like, oh, you must practice a lot. And then sort of thinking, well, not really. I just like to play the guitar. So I come home from school and I'd start to play the guitar straight away. I know when I was doing juggling, then it was just, you would just do it as soon as there was a moment when nobody was asking anything else for you. So that's that little candle that I've talked about in one of the earlier episodes, that you had that inside you. That is something that was yours, that in every way did not come from your parents. It's that one thing unique inside you that you found then out in the world later on, and found the fuel for it out.
I had no idea. I had no idea that you could be a circus performer. And like I knew you could be a professional actor, because, you know, I watched TV and movies, and occasionally we went to the theater. But it never seemed like a thing that I could actually, like an actual real job, I could actually achieve and do that thing. So I think when I started meeting actual circus performers, like I remember meeting Mr. Spin at the Fremantle Street Arts Festival, and it blew my mind. Like, Mr. Spin was doing 2 Diablos and had a DVD with him doing 2 Diablos in like a train yard. And, you know, for $10 in his hat, I could get that DVD. And working like just even in Western Australia with Berserkers, with Brendan and Ross, they came when I started doing circus. We had a little circus troupe, and I remember them coming to circus troupe, and they taught me how to do Mills Mess, because I didn't even know that was a thing. And I could do columns, and I could kind of do a little bit of a cascade. And then they're like, okay, this is Mills Mess. And, you've probably helped someone learn Mills Mess before, and it's not the easiest thing to teach because it doesn't make any sense. But it's still a beautiful pattern.
It's a beautiful pattern, but it's kind of like starting again. You already knew how to juggle, but then you changed the parameters so much that it's almost like, I remember that too. My mind was blown by that whole family of kind of cross-armed tricks that Mills Mess and Rubenstein Revenge and those, that it was like with the hands moving back and forth crossing, it like that opened up this whole other dimension. I remember being particularly
so the way I learned it was because it's a 3/4 beat. It's like 1 2 3 1 2 3, so it's like a waltz. But then because I was doing musical theater at the time, it was papa, that's how it goes, papa. So it was like this crazy melding of these two crazy things. But yeah, even with that, they came and just did a circus workshop like I do now, to schools and stuff. And now they're my family, they're my best friends. And I was accepted, I think, into this clandestine secret society of misfits that, accepted in their ranks a random 14-year-old kid and just treated him like an adult. And, from there I've learned literally how to live my life. And I don't think that really happens too much around the world with other sorts of things, and now I treat my students like they're adults, because if you just talk to them like kids, they're not going to learn anything. And that's the same thing. I remember Scott Henman, Scott Chocolate, teaching me at a juggle jam how to do some tricks, and he just talked to me like a regular person, and I was just like learning so much because it was this guy who was teaching me stuff, and I wasn't paying him, he wasn't asking for money, he just wanted to help. And I think that was really the beautiful part of this. Yeah. And now, now I'm from touring around the world. I have this extended clandestine secret society of misfits all over the world, that I know that I can go to Spain and I can go see my friend Kiki and Amelia, and I can go to Germany and go see my friend Mario, and go to America. There's a whole bunch of people over there that I've not seen but have great friendships with. And I think it as well as I do, that when you're around your little crazy circus people, you're just a family.
Yeah, and you're united by, this sort of dedication as well. And it's got this certain sort of meritocracy as well, where when I rock up at, like in Italy now, and I didn't really know a single person, had not met some of the organizers or whatever. But then when you then go on stage and I do my stuff, then the change of my experience of the festival is almost a 180. Like it's just totally transformed from I'm just some guy walking around, and then they see me perform, and then all of a sudden they go, oh, this now we've got a new measure of you. And all of a sudden you stand out and they're going, this is a real one. And you get that in the rooms when you're doing a workshop or whatever, and a kid comes up and they show you their ability, and you just immediately get the gestalt of the situation going, okay, so you're this age and you're doing this trick, and that means that you're like one of those that I could be ending up in 15 years. Like I remember having that the very first time I met Tom Flanagan, just I didn't know him, and from the first conversation when we sat down, it was like you just have this feeling like this guy is one of us. And you're like from that Freaks movie, Todd Browning's movie, one of us, we accept you, one of us, where you go every now and then you talk to someone and you just immediately know that this is one of those people that the pandemic comes and everything that we do falls into ashes. But some of these people, there's no doubt in my mind that this is just going to be a blip on the radar, and then we will be back to doing what we did, even though during this pandemic so many people have actually those who didn't have that passion really thoroughly kindled or weren't sure, they fell off the wagon at these last 2 years. Some of them might come back, but it's cleared the ranks a little bit as to going, are you in this because your heart can't go into anything else? Like any sidestepping that was done during the pandemic was, for me, just completely temporary. It was always like, how can I get back to doing this?
I guess I never even considered really, like when we actually did have a real lockdown, and when COVID first started over here, and I was actually on a cruise ship at the time, so I'd stopped working on cruise ships, but my agent called and went like, Scoops, what are you doing tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning? Can you get on a cruise ship? There's a ship that hasn't had entertainment for 2 weeks around Africa. They're coming into Perth. They're finishing in Sydney. You can get off in Adelaide. Just like get on the ship, do your show, have a sleep, and then get off in Adelaide. And I was like, all right, I'll do it. And yeah, got on the ship. I hadn't worked for this cruise line company before, so it was slightly different, but it's a cruise ship, so I knew what I was doing, and had a wonderful show. They were so hungry for entertainment, and they were so appreciative, and it was such a great show. I hadn't actually done that show for a little while as well, because I'd stopped doing that particular stage show, and it was just fun to just get back into it. And then that night we were all sitting at the crew bar having a drink, and I think it was like 12:05, and then one by one, all of the managers' phones started ringing around the table, and they all looked at their phone, and they'd all lost their jobs.
Oh wow!
And but they had to continue the journey to Sydney, because that was the end of the cruise to get the people off. So there was this weird thing of like, do we keep doing our job when I know I'm not going to keep my job? And I was
wow.
I'm off tomorrow. Like, but it was just this collective sink, good word for a cruise ship. A collective sink of what's going on and how do we kind of manage through this. And I got off and went home, and I was like, oh, I live in Perth, it's totally fine. And then my emails started coming in, this is cancelled, this is cancelled, this is cancelled. And it's like, okay, it's just a couple, and then more and more. And then all of the European festivals cancelled. So that was my tour done. We're not going to Germany. And then it was just bam, bam, bam. And then I'd lost 2 years worth of work within 2 days.
Yeah,
and wow. I never did think, okay, now I have to go and get a real job, because I can't. I've kind of sunk into this, and my fallback is doing street shows in Fremantle, where I've done them before, and it's a beautiful pitch. And I was just like, if I need to pay the mortgage, I'll go do some street shows. And then no one's on the street, so you can't do street shows. But I had just enough trickling of maybe just doing a circus workshop here, sanitizing all the equipment beforehand when we were allowed to do that. And I also had savings that I ate through quite a bit to kind of get me through that. But I never really did think, okay, now I need to go and work at, a bricklayer. I can go do bricklaying, which I did actually learn a skill when I think we were making the show when I was building my brick wall.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have that skill now.
Yeah, that's but it's like, this is like some sort of hobby or whatever. What most people do for, like, oh yeah, you could be a bricklayer. That was a great wall you built there. You did all of that, and you taught yourself, and you leveled it, and you did it all, and it's a standing solid wall now. And then you go, you could do this, and you're going, no, this is just like a hobby. It's like, I pick up bricklaying like juggling. I was like, I remember that. Yeah, I was at this festival, and some hippie taught me to juggle in the field, and then I went back to my bricklaying. That's how we do it with the other kinds of occupations. But
I think even with that, just to stay on the bricklaying metaphor a little bit, because when I was building that, I was also in like quite a deep state of depression because of the whole COVID thing. And it made me think about if I was going to become a bricklayer, and kind of thinking about different jobs. And when you're a bricklayer, you wake up in the morning, you go to work, you lay bricks all day, you come home, and that's the end of your job. Whereas for us, if you do something you love, you never work a day in your life, which is just completely untrue, because we're always working. We're always coming up with new ideas. We're always thinking about the solution to a problem, be it a juggling pattern or a discount for a certain school to do a workshop here, or how can I get this artist to come and be a part of my festival, even though we've only got a tiny budget? All of these different problems and solutions. We're always thinking about our craft, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, that's so true. And then when you're a freelancer too, you're always kind of saying yes to all work, because even before the pandemic, there's always this chance. Then it was just like, oh, contract suddenly gets cancelled or whatever. There was a tsunami, and all of a sudden 5 months in Hawaii was just knocked over or whatever, and you stand without work. So you always have this hanging over you, and that's another sort of thing that then a pandemic came and you go even more. Yeah, like you got to just say yes to everything, and you're afraid that there's going to be nothing coming. Even yeah.
You always have. I don't know if it's true for you or other people, performers listening, but you've just finished that big run of New Year's Eve gigs and things like that, and then January comes around, and in Australia we've got Australia Day, so that's a big gig, so we do that, and then after that there's that big gap in the calendar, and or you've got a couple of gigs coming up, but then the second half of the year doesn't have anything, and you go, how am I going to survive this year? And then somehow we always do really well, and we always book the gigs, but there is me, like, I consider myself quite successful with what I'm doing, but even I would know deep down in my heart that maybe there are no more bookings. Maybe there are.
It's like it's all connected up around this kind of imposter syndrome, and like I have never had another job than this, and I've managed to support myself successfully and then support my family with this up until now, and even then through the pandemic. Yet that thought, it's like going, oh, I got no gigs in October. It's like, oh, maybe that's it. It's like, maybe that's the end of my career. Like you just wake up in the middle of the night, and then that's what pops up. Even though it's kind of an irrational idea at this point, it's just seems like it never really lets hold of you.
I do love that idea of you having a garage sale because you've decided to quit because you can't make any more money, so you're selling roller bowlers and decks of cards, and that's all you've got. You just got like 20 sets of clubs, and people are like, where's the stuff? And it's like, this is what I've got.
Is this your life here? Yeah. I just did that line the other day. I did a show for some students, and I'm doing a whip cracking act where somebody's holding something and I'm whipping it out of their hand. And I did a line that I first heard from Shane, the Space Cowboy, where he just goes, oh, and if I do injure you or whatever, then I'm sorry. You can sue me, of course, and look at all this cool stuff you can get.
Cool stuff you'll get.
Yeah. And I said that, and I thought that was resonating with myself on all sorts of levels afterwards, because I was like, oh, this is the sum of it. When my daughter just came into, now I have a magic room in this new house that I have set up where I have all of my stuff and whatever. Yeah. And she comes in and she's always looking around, because I keep buying stuff or keep putting things in there that are so weird. And they're just, well, I just have to have them all here because I'm sort of in the middle of making a new show. And then you just got to have it all standing out and lying on the couches and all that to sort of, so that they can connect the way that synapses are firing in my head when I'm sleeping about these ideas. So you wake up and have to take notes in the middle of the night. You want the same thing to happen visually in the room, that the props are just all lying around, so that all of a sudden two things that seemed not to be related all of a sudden are lying next to each other, or like, and you go, oh, now I see, oh, that's one more joke there, or that's a whole idea for a routine or whatever.
Yeah, like linking rings and juggling rings.
Yeah. There you go. That's exactly right. It's like, so you got the rings, and then that's where often the biggest sort of creative leaps comes from those linking two things that don't seem to be related, and all of a sudden you got something new and exciting. But let's get on and start talking about the show. So you had like you said, you have like your show that you do at your cruise ship, and you're doing a street show, and you've done had a long career of doing shows. And then the pandemic kind of hit, which made all of us think we were needing to do some kind of creation, because we couldn't do any shows now. So then you go, well, then I got to take this opportunity to do some creation. So what I mean, there's kind of two things. One is related to me. Like, maybe one was like, what was it that you wanted to do? Because you've got a career and you want to do something new, or you realize you have a bunch of time, so you want to do a larger kind of creation. So that's the one thing. Like, what was it that you wanted from that, and how did that then make you think that you were going to contact me?
Well, I think with my show, when I watch it back, my character, because it's a kind of like a high status character, but also self-deprecating, because I've got that street performer in me. So I've got this like, look how great I am, but also look at all the cool stuff you'll get, sort of stuff. And I was working on a line for my cruise ship show that really was about that, trying really hard, and you got to keep trying. But I wrote it out, and I learnt the whole lines, and I performed it in the show, and like maybe twice every 10 times the audience would clap afterwards, and I was like, why isn't this hitting? Because it's all there. It's like, I kind of tell the story of my life a little bit. It was 2.5 minutes. And you know what happened the first time I tried this trick? I failed. But I didn't give up. And that's the secret to getting good at things. You never give up. Don't give up when things get hard, which is not the line that I was using before, which is the line we actually wrote in the end. And I was trying to figure out like what's going on here, because it's basically me doing a monologue on stage, and I'm trying to empathize with my audience and show them who I am, but also I'm a clown, and also I'm like this high status juggler guy who's definitely going to impress you. So it didn't really mesh, and I've been trying to mesh it together for several years, instead of just being a go out there, power show, wham bam, thank you ma'am, here's my tricks, and you go, yeah, that was a good show, but there wasn't anything else behind it. It was just that I had lots of fun, which is basically all I was doing. And then I started working on a line that involved that story about my dad and the military. So I was doing a club juggling routine, and there's that line, about my parents think I'm going to university, look at me now, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then I expanded on that and did the whole, but Dad, I'm an artist. And I danced around like an artist, and that got jokes, got laughs from that joke. And I noticed after the show, I was just hanging around in the cruise ship, and this guy came up to me, and he wanted to talk to me about the Royal Australian Air Force, because that's where my dad was in. And he's like, oh, maybe I knew your dad. And he really connected with my show, because he connected with my story about what I did and who I was. And I was like, this is where I need to go. And then I started listening to The Way of the Showman, and you did an episode about some kids shows that you did, because I knew you as this performer. I think I first met you at the circus festival many years ago, but I was still like a little kid, and we didn't like properly meet. So I always thought of you as this like adult cabaret performer, and that's what you were as well. Yeah. And you were just like the superstar. And then you started talking about this kid stuff that you were doing, and everything you said to me resonated. And I think I even messaged you and said like, that was really cool. Do you have any footage? And you were like, no, I don't have any footage of that. And then I think I mulled that over as I was going for walks, trying to like clear the depression haze. And I had my headphones on in the rain, walking through, listening to The Way of the Showman. And what I think really stuck out for me is what I termed the heart part. That's what you were talking about. You were talking about the heart part. It's all good and fine to wow people and really, take them out of their life for, 15:45 an hour. And then entertain them, and then they go back to their life, and it's just a nice, happy little thing. But if you inject a little bit of heart into that, that's what really makes your show from just a juggling show to the next level theater show, like experience. And I was like, okay, well, I'll try and do that. And I just couldn't. So I was like, I definitely need help here. So stab in the dark, I'll send Frodo a message. and then we created A One Man Circus.
Yeah, I mean, because I remember that, and I remember you using that word as well, that you wanted to inject some heart into it. Because like it's going. You are right on what I hadn't thought of what I do as that, but that is a sort of theme. I want this kind of depth of character, and to make the character so real or so human that when you then share your deeper insights, that the audience, that it really resonates with people. Like more and more I'm landing on this thing of, the more you think through what you do, and the reason why I'm doing this prolonged 1 year long season of second season that I call it, where I'm talking about the way of the showman, what it actually is. It is this to go, if you think through all these things and embodies these ideas, even though I'm not talking about them when I am doing my show. Like I just had the guy from Italy as well, the Walter Rolfo, who organized the FISM, and when it was in Italy, the World Championship of Magic, and he organizes this festival called Masters of Magic, and he goes, and he saw me do the spoon balance thing. Actually, that was the first thing I did at that festival, at the memorial for a guy called Jabba, which was a sort of freak show. He was a magician, but he turned into becoming like a freak show man, and the biggest kind of pusher of freak show as an art form in Italy. And then he died just quite suddenly of cancer last year. And they were doing a memorial to him, and I did my act there. Anyway, this guy Walter Rolfo, then he said, it's just incredible when you come onto the stage, because as soon as you walk out to do something, it's like I just feel like I can watch you do anything. And I said to him, I think it is this thing that I really have thought so thoroughly through all of these elements of why I belong where I am. And just these 2 pandemic years where I basically wrote this book that is the second season, and thoroughly thought it through and structured it even more than ever. I feel like I've sort of grown as an artist without having to be on the stage. So, I mean, I think when you said that, it's like I want to put the heart into the show. It's like you got the whole you got the show that is by all means successful already, but there's something more, and that something more is something that I keep thinking of as something that's beyond the tricks. And ideas or things you want to express that are beyond the tricks, there are also things that are then coming truly from you. And as you've already sort of said, you had your story that you told in the beginning of this, and you had you have a very unique story to tell, and yeah, so it was just about shaping that. And I felt that as soon as we started to talk about the show, like I was going, you already have everything here. We are just looking to structure it. Like you have the material and you do have the character, or at the time I thought that you had the character, but we'll get to that as well. Like we exploded your idea of character as we went on. But
that was such a good conversation.
You just need structure. Yeah, I was thinking that at that moment I was wrong, because I always divided up into the material, what you do, and the character, who is doing it, and the structure and how this is put together. And I felt like, well, it's going to be a relatively easy thing that we're going to do. We're going to spend the first 4 sessions, and we're going to get to an idea of how we will structure this, so that when the speech and the more emotive heart elements comes out in the show, the audience will be waiting for it, kind of. Yeah. That's what I thought, but it kind of went in a much deeper way, and our collaboration went on and on and on, and we kept kind of. So yeah. So when you normally make a show, like how do you normally make a show, and was that different from this way that we did it now, where you sort of sort out a director or somebody to?
Well, yes and no. I've worked with directors before. Very successfully. I worked with Ross Vegas. We wrote a show called Millennial Vaudeville that didn't end up getting performed, unfortunately, but it was a really great concept around that idea of vaudeville and what vaudeville was. And me being a millennial, what do I know? So it's kind of like that modern twist on something old, which is for the cruise ship market, especially that line, that's exactly what they wanted, the vintage with a modern twist. So that's the show we wrote. And even though it wasn't performed, I think it was still a really fun time. But what I normally do is, because I tend to have my different disciplines, I would just make an act, and then my show would just be like a variety show with just different acts. So when, Adam and I made our first shows, it was just like, okay, what can we do? We'll do a juggling routine. Cool. We'll do a juggling routine. And then what? And then we'll do something funny. Okay, cool. Okay, and then what? We'll do our Diablo act.
Yeah.
Cool. And then we'll pass 3 Diablos, and that's a really impressive trick. And then we'll do fire, and that's it.
Yeah, so it's like a
a
short story collection or whatever. Like it's just a sequence of short stories that I've put in some order based on. Like we do the most impressive stuff in the end, and then we start with this or whatever. Yeah, but it doesn't have
very much that sort of street show. Yeah. I've done. I think that's where we connected very well, because we both came from the street as well. But that idea of it's not a 3-act structure. It's not a hero's journey. It's a street show. It's about getting people's attention and also entertaining them in the best way possible. But if it's a stage show, you don't have a crowd draw. So how do you impart your character and get the crowd drawn in when they're already sitting there on their seats?
I think,
and then from that,
the crowd draw is a little bit like a hero's journey in a way, like, because you start with nothing, and those first people who stop there, who see you turn and patch of dirt or just some tarmac on a street and turn that into a stage, those people saw you fight a real fight against all odds, and they saw it come out. So that is it's so true. Like what you said is like, this is where the character really comes out and where you love it. But when they just come in and they're like sitting down, haven't bought a ticket or whatever, maybe they're going like, just, okay, impress us now, give us a $12 worth immediately. Kind of, so they haven't got that organic kind of thing. That's a very interesting point. I haven't sort of thought of it quite like that before, what is left out in the crowd build, or when you don't have a crowd build, of where you get to see that real human that you are in the beginning, when you go from being just one other person, but slowly you make people stop, and once that dynamic changes and you have lots of people looking at you, then something else is going on straight away. And those people who are there from the beginning, they see that transformation of you from man to showman or whatever. So that's very cool. Sorry, I kind of interrupted your flow there.
Oh, that's okay. I was just thinking about, when I kind of created shows, it was about the acts that I had, the skills I had, and then on top of that, adding my character to it. And my character has developed, I'm essentially still me. So most people in the circus world know me as Scooby. That's my name. And only now I've started to be using my true name as Morgan James. So everyone knew me as Scooby, and that's the character I was, because Scooby was the circus name I had. Scooby was the circus person I was. And I was this kind of larger than life crazy guy, like a wild and crazy guy, Steve Martin. But weird and long hair and a beard and strange costumes. And I think I developed the character from obviously the street, because you need to be someone. You can't just be a brilliant 9-ball juggler on the street, because people will just stop and go, huh, and then they walk past. I'm not that guy. I can't juggle 9 balls yet.
No.
Yet.
Still working on that. Still doing the failing bit of that.
Yeah. I still haven't. I've got the drops down. I've got to get the catches. Yeah. And I think from that, I kind of found my audience, because I really, really love entertaining family audiences, not just kids, but kids with their parents. Because from my street, I had the adult lines, but because there were kids there, I have to adapt them. So there's that double entendre without being too silly about it. And with the kids, I could be a clown, because I've trained clown. But with my street show, I couldn't really be a clown, because adults were a bit, just do the juggling and make me laugh. As opposed to with kids, you could be super silly. And because I teach so much, I taught so much back then, much more than I do now. I was always around primary school age kids, and the workshop couldn't start because one of the teachers has to go and get something. So I'm just on a stage with 30 to 60 kids in front of me. What do? You just stand there and go, "Oh, sorry guys, we can't start yet. Just don't have fun yet." No, I'm gonna start throwing around my hat and just playing and playing and playing and playing. And from that play, I developed what is the start of A One Man Circus. But I developed this hat gag routine, which I didn't really put any work into because it was just me playing around. And then I got laughs, and then I just kind of created a bit of a structure with the rule of three. So putting that character together with this street performer character, or with the cruise ship show, this high profile larrikin, for lack of a better word, trying to smash them together, I have been doing quite well with, but I needed to expand that as well. And that's where A One Man Circus comes in.
Yeah, because I remember seeing that routine, and I think I pretty much from the very beginning, I was just like, this is such strong material, that hat act of, because it also has this, it's such a good sort of clown principle that you go, okay, well, I know how to do this. And then you put the hat on, and the hat is upside down, sitting on top of your head, or sitting on its side on your head. And the kids are going, no, it's not like this. And you're going, this thing here, it's such a good, strong clowning kind of thing. And it's like material right up my street when I perform for the kids, where it's funny for the adults because they, for one, they're seeing the actual jokes that you're doing, and it's an act that this idea of just this guy doesn't know how to put his hat on, like all good clown acts are kind of like that. My act, when you go, well, what is your tennis act? Well, it's like I say I'm going to squeeze through the rackets, and then I do, and encounter some problems along the way. I mean, that is the story.
It goes for 10 minutes.
Yeah, and it goes 10 minutes. Or like it's the two clowns, and they both want to sit on a chair, and it's the funniest thing you ever saw in your life. And you go, oh, it doesn't sound like much of a story or whatever, but this guy's just putting his hat on, and the kids are educating him as to how to do it because he doesn't get it, and you think you do, and the development of it. But the adults also, then they see how you have developed this shouting match with the kids, and how the kids are rolling around on the ground. So they both see the act, but they also see what you are doing to the kids. So they see the kind of meta thing of it. And I really felt like that was the bit that it was so strong, but that act and that material was different than most of the other material that you did. Even the bit that you do in between, which you got the great stuff, would want to see more, and you got that little sign which you can talk about. But it's like that's also funny, but that is the same character that we saw there, that what we now are calling like Morgan James. It's like, it's not Scooby, that's that guy that comes out on stage and he's like got the tricks and he's a cool and impressive guy. And that other act, that was something. So it was kind of through that act that we leveraged and found something completely different, because you, as you said, you had that aspect but hadn't quite found how to put that kind of clowning that came more from improvisation and stuff. And
I think the development of the two acts is very different, and that's where you could see, and I knew that they're very different in style, and they still work together, but they're very different in style. And it's because that hat act literally just came from play, and my other acts, like my Diablo act, that was made through hard work and practice, and
they created it through skill,
some tricks, so
exactly.
Two different things.
It very good. That's a very good point there. How one, it's like it's a sequence of tricks, and there's not that. I mean, you do in your ball juggling or whatever. There's all sorts of things you do there to really open up so that there is a third space for the audience to insert them into. But in that first one, it's clowning. It's what my friend Nalla talks about in his book, The Clown Manifesto, of like the core of what the clown does is to play. It's to be watched while he plays, and through that play we create connection, or we make connections, and then we play with those connections. And that's what that act with the hat, which just basically is a whole bunch of you not knowing how to put your hat on, and then going, and finally he goes, I know where the hat goes, it goes on my foot. And then you have the setup for the perfect punchline or the perfect kick line in the end there, where the hat goes on there and they go, oh, it goes on the head. Okay, let me do it. And then you do a kick up to the head. And
it goes on my head. You should have said.
Yeah, you should have said. And then the hat goes on the head, and now we're ready to start. But yeah, I can't fully remember exactly how because we were talking about this act, and this was when I think I was sitting at an airport in Germany somewhere, and we started to talk about this act, and how did we end up with exploding this act so much that it actually introduced a third person into the show, or whatever.
Yeah,
second person, I mean.
Yeah, second performer. Yeah. Well, you were in the show as well. You were in
That's
there.
what I was thinking, because I'm there as a voiceover in the beginning. That came also. I think that came later, but because I got then to interact not with Morgan James, but I got to interact with this new person that emerged. So how do you remember? What's your memory of how that character came out?
Well, I think I was trying to vocalize my confusion with my character being a larrikin, but also like this high status, like world famous juggler guy, which is the character. And I'm like, how do we make these two things meet? Because I've got this clown and I've got this juggler, and I'm doing a pretty good job of it, but it's not quite there. So how do we mesh them? And I think we started to do a great jam on it, because there was this clown act. It was just an essential clown act with a tiny bit of hat manip. And then throughout my different acts, I have comedy bits, because that's where my comedy comes out. So I've got the more sign, do you want to see more? Classic. I think I invented that joke. I'm pretty sure. Yeah,
I haven't seen anyone else do it. It's brilliant.
I think people have been copying me for about 70 years with that joke.
No, it's great. Yeah. Do you want to see more? I know what you want to see. You want to see more, and then you pull out a sign, and it just says more, and it's just it comes out of the blue, because you've just been doing juggling until that. So it's your first kind of prop gag or whatever, and it's.
And we also we talked about it, I think, in a previous thing, but we both love absurd comedy as well, and I love absurd comedy, and I want to put it into my show as much as possible. So if I could just go crazy and not worry about actually making money, I'd probably be dancing around in a gorilla suit with a ribbon and just doing really absurd, like Mighty Boosh-esque things, singing random songs. But that's where my comedy is. So how do I bring some more absurdity into it? So we had that, and we've got some other little things in the show, because that was kind of like the clown was kind of the mesh between the skill. And then I think we started talking about that, and then going, okay, well, as you did, you labeled out all the different acts and how long they all took. And then what do we do here? What do we do here? And it was kind of labeled as like act, clown, act, clown, act, clown. And then we were trying to grapple with that idea of this clown in the show. And I'm trying to remember it, but I can't remember how we did it. Do you remember how we got?
No, I don't remember exactly, but it was through this where we're looking at this, because the way that the clown, as an archetype or as a character in the circus, relates to the audience is this really participatory thing where the children can really shout and connect with them or whatever, and it's a different way of connecting with them. And I think because we had these two flavors that you had previously successfully done, you've been doing these jokes, so it wasn't so much that we created a bunch of new material for it. A lot of it was just like fitting these two things, exactly like you said. We've gone, okay, well, here's this flavor, here's that flavor, then comes these, well, those are like basically the acts, are the skills. Here's the Diablo, here's the balls, here's the plates, or plate spinning or whatever, like that sort of, those are skill driven acts. And then it's almost like you're just looking at these things and the stuff that's happening in between, and you're going round about here. We want to say something emotional. We want to have that set up, and it has to happen here and here because those others are. So that you start to see this pattern. And I don't know if it is just that that it sort of popped out at us through conversation by just having spoken about the clown and spoken about all this stuff. But at some point,
You know what? I remember what it is. We were talking about the start. We were talking about absurd comedy, and I think I said something like, "Wouldn't it be funny if there was just a random old guy that just popped into the show and interrupted the show, just for absolutely no reason, and he's not mentioned ever again, like a plant in the audience, like a literal pot plant. This is a plant in the audience. That sort of absurdity." And then I think we were just jamming on an idea of that, and then I was like, okay, well, what's the start of the show? The start of the show is the hat gag, and then we both just went, cool. The old man does the hat gag. So then we had this idea, and then we were jamming on this old man doing a bit of an act who was interrupting the show, and then he turned into the old man of the circus. Kind of, he likes the circus and he wants to be a part of the circus. And then it was, no, he was in the circus, but he doesn't know where he is anymore, and he's this old, decrepit circus performer, which comes off of another show that I'm developing, which is, we can talk about that later. And I think it probably ties into that idea of this old man of the circus. And so we were like, cool, we've got this old man of the circus, and he's going to come and do the hat gag, and he'll introduce Morgan James, and Morgan James will come out on stage and he'll do the whole show. And I think we were so excited from that conversation with you sitting in the airport, and I was just sitting at home. I think I was moving house at the time, so I was feverishly packing all this stuff around, and we just kind of started bouncing and bouncing and bouncing, and it just, when we made that old man do the act, it just made sense.
Yeah.
It was just like fitting into a hole. It was just perfect. It just fit. And
for me, it was also like, once we started to talk about that, and then you go, because first it was just like, like an absurd idea. What, wouldn't that be weird if you had something like that? But then as soon as you place any kind of actual constrictions on yourself, where you're going, well, I'm not going to go casting for an old person. So that's obviously, if it's going to happen, then it's going to have to be you. And so, like, very quickly, of course, it's like in the span of 2 ideas, then that goes it. And then you're going, okay, well, if you do that. But then for me, what was so interesting is like, throwing out this thing, and because it is rare, really, in my experience, that people like us who come from the street or whatever do different characters. So in the beginning, we were jamming on the idea because it was funny, and the idea kind of kept unfolding. But even as we were speaking, I was kind of wondering, well, how are we going to embody this within that Morgan James character? Like, because we're jamming on this thing, but it's like, well, what is that? You're going to put on one of those masks of an old man or whatever that they used in Jackass, or like what is like what like, so you're sort of playing with the idea but not fully taking it seriously, which also made it very playful because it kept so open. But then once we started to look at it, what I found really interesting was, well, if it's you and you got some sort of costume on, when you then introduce yourself on, that will actually be a really interesting moment. And so much like it, after that next session, I think then it was just clear that this would be valuable, and that also that the old man would come back on again, and those transitions of where you are reintroducing your yourself, like you're coming on, because then we started, that's what we started the show with. Like, I was on the voiceover and doing, here he comes, ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, the legendary Morgan James. And as I was doing that, an old man came in and interrupted the thing.
Don't start the show.
Yeah. And you found the voice as we were going out, because we were just jamming on there and putting on a voice to separate just because we were doing everything digitally, being COVID and everything, and you being in Western Australia, which was kind of interesting. Because if you and me were to do the creative process that we would have done, and I would have come over to Western Australia or whatever, and we worked for 1 week, I don't think we would have found this. It came from working 1 or 2 sessions a week over an extended period of time, so that we had already had 3 or 4 sessions before this old man appeared, as far as I remember. And
we went through a lot of stuff.
And then he also sort of matured into being the backbone of the show, and the playful game that now came out with you introducing yourself. Well, you can talk more in detail about that, but like, because what was interesting was that we spent so much time talking about how will the children relate to this fact that the old man comes on, and we were quite sure that we didn't want to pretend that you were an old man and have like 6 hours of makeup or whatever, so you basically just got this sweetest classic fake beard, so that we
and we talked about that a lot, having like an obviously fake beard as well, but not too low quality, but low quality enough that that it's a fake beard. And that's why the old man also had a dressing gown, like a robe with circus tassels on it. So he didn't really fit in. He wasn't a sharpened performer. So we used the old man as the clown conduit because he was in essence a kid. He was a child trying to make sense of the world, but going, no, I'm an old man, so I know what I'm doing. Which allowed us to tell that story a lot better. And also, the theme of A One Man Circus being you should fail until you fail at failing. And so the old man gets to be that guy who goes, oh, so, what do you do when you fail? You just give up, right? That's what you do. I'm old and I know what I'm talking about. If you're not good at something, just give up. And then because we've set it up in the show, then the kids go, no, old man, you're wrong.
Yeah. I love that parallel. Yeah. So the parallel between the old man who goes, wow, it's because Morgan James comes on and he blows you away with the high technical juggling skills, and he's funny and it's flashy and it's fast paced and it's got this like pumping music to the act. So it's like it lifts it up to like, oh, Vegas style, this is exciting. And then he goes off and then the old man comes on and goes, oh, well, that's all well and good for him to talk about how to achieve impossible things, but he's young and excited, but I can't do it because I'm old. I love that bit too, where he can really be that voice. And then I think we even flipped it in the script as well, where you go, and you are kids, so you can't do it because you're too young. And you sort of name all these reasons that people give themselves for why they can't do the impossible.
That was such a fun moment in the show because it's like, I can't do these things because I'm older. Do you know who else can't do it? Kids, because kids are stupid.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
How did just their reaction? Kid jumping up, like no. I had one little kid who was so engrossed and in the game of the show, he marched up on stage and started pretending to like throw air punches at the old man, and the stage hands like, oh my god. I'm like, no, don't worry, like trying to tell him to like, don't let worry, this go.
I can take this kid. This kid, he's just about my strength. That's so fun.
Yeah. But that moment where the kids are into the game, but then they get to have a say. But what they're saying is what they actually believe in now because they've actually heard the message of believe in yourself. And kids aren't stupid because kids are really smart. But old people say that kids are dumb because they don't know anything yet. And I think that permission to be able to get up and go, no, kids aren't stupid. I don't give up. They've self-affirmed.
Yeah, and I find that interesting too. Is like the old man comes up and all his tricks and all his stuff is sort of based on an ineptitude. So he's got an absolute childlike kind of heart. This old man, and he's cantankerous or he talks down and he's like all that. But you get that this kid, like he thinks he's the bomb, but he's actually pretty stupid, really. Like in the way that the character interacts with them. And what I really am interested in and what I like is to, without having told them what to say, by just asking the right kind of questions and setting it up so that the only answer that the kids can do is to shout out positive affirmations. You are worth something, you are like, or whatever, like those kind of things. It's kind of cheesy, but when you go, but kids, but we can't do this because I'm old and you can't do it because you're stupid. And then through that carefully crafted back and forth shouting, you get them to lecture the old man, like the Morgan James came on and he's talking about, how did I learn to do these impossible things? And it was this beautiful moment with the torches, like a campfire, kind of, you're holding it up and lighting it up, and you're talking to the kids around the campfire about how to do impossible things, which is often then that's the emotional moment of a show. But where I felt like A One Man Circus stepped beyond it was that then Morgan James, the funny and exciting character, was backstage, and then a little puppet came up whilst you're quickly changing your costume of the old man, and he is sitting above the kind of backdrop, and he does a huge fall where, like with sound effects, where he's falling down the stairs and all that, and then you come on again as the old man and basically start playing with, well, he's going to do some skills, but he's playing with what you have just said, and it gave this wonderful way of taking what sort of feels like what I talk about, like when I'm sitting on the cans. It's like in the worst possible way that could be the Jerry Springer moment, when you've had everything is gone happening and the talk show host, and then he sits down in the end and he goes, so what have we learned today? So you had that moment, but we made it so that your moments are like my moment on the cans, when you're on the ground and everything is burned, everything like the fire is burning, literally is growing, and you're sitting around the torches about to do the routine, and you talk about the impossible thing you're going to do and how they can do it. Then they get that, but then the old man comes on and kind of makes and furthers that idea by first sort of poking a little bit of fun of it, but also then going like, yeah, but I can't do that. And that really then also like solidifies this idea through the playful approach of the clown, where they come on and they're trying to get you on board and going like, we can't do it because I can't drive a car. Like, that was fun. You were saying something about, what was that you said with the kids can't even drive.
Yeah, you don't even have a license. Yeah, kids can't drive a car, don't even have a license, don't even have a job, can't pay the rent, can't pay the mortgage. But then there was with the car one, it's like, I can't drive a car anymore, not since I crashed my truck into Bayswater Bridge. Because in Perth, there was a bridge. Sadly, no longer, they've removed it. But there was a bridge that trucks crashed into on a weekly, if not daily basis. And it was a bit of a mythological bridge in Perth. So trying to bring some of that heart of my town into the show as well. But it was also, I don't know if you know this, but I did do that line. Like, we took it out. We did take it out because we were just running too much. But I did do it once, and it got a good laugh from the adults.
Ah, great.
So I was like, yes, yeah.
But that's lovely to tie it into the local setting. But for me, it was also just that thing where you ram home to the children and to the adults how similar because you as an old man are going like, kids are stupid, and then once they've calmed down on that, and going and they're not stupid, they can't do anything. I mean, they can't even drive a car. And then he goes, well, I guess I can't do a car. I can't actually drive either. But that's not the point. Like, you guys don't have a job. Kids don't have jobs. And then you're the old man, so he goes, well, actually, I'm too old. I can't have a job either. So it just becomes, without saying, I'm like you guys, he is attacking them for why are they useless, and then it just keeps unfolding that actually he's just like them. And all of that, like the way that unfolded, and each one of those things kind of has a call and response kind of thing with the kids. That I thought that was really what brought it. Was really nice as well.
I think one of the important parts of that section of the show is the beauty of circus and what circus does for people, and what circus has given me, or like learning to juggle, for instance, like that idea of just don't give up. You know, like I don't think I'll ever probably get to 9-ball juggling, but I know that I could if I really tried. But there are so many people in this world who just go, I can't. Like, how many people, like jugglers out there, people go, I don't know how you do that. I'm so uncoordinated. And it's like, well, you're only uncoordinated because you haven't practiced it. That's it. Like, there is just that. You know, there might be some things external to that, but if you get better at it, then you can do it. That's it. And I think injecting that into people's minds, especially in a family show, going, no, you can, and it's not one of those things where, oh, you can do anything, follow your dreams. It's like, no, there's a practical approach to this. You can't just learn to levitate, but you can learn to fly a plane. So giving that approach really helped kind of solidify that character, if that makes any sense.
Yes, it really does. Yeah, I think so too. I think it's always that you start out with something that's very simple, and it's for you. It's like it's connected to grit, like to not give up and all this. It's so it's pretty. I always find like the theme of a book when you're writing a book. It's like then the book can be about that, but never actually specifically say it. But what was kind of interesting here is that you had that dynamic, so you could have this conversation in a way between a guy that could do impossible things, but he becomes put a little, like, so Morgan James comes on, he juggles the fire with a blindfold, and we've built up how difficult that is and how dangerous and all that. And to that, the kids are having fun, but they don't fully relate because it's so far that they can't quite grasp any. There's no hook for them to go, yeah, I could do that. Like they go, oh man, juggling with a blindfold is just already too much. But then when the clown character of the old man comes on, he can really make it, sell it to you like he brings them along to that point, and he then ends up talking about how he invented the circus back in the day when he invented clapping or whatever, all that.
Yeah, I love that aspect that we added that very close to the end of our creation period as well. No, it was probably, I think we were literally on the floor and you were on the camera, and then we're like, oh, the old man, he's the guy.
Just to paint that picture of what that was like, because we were so far apart. Norway and Western Australia is about as far away as you could possibly be. So but then came the point where you were actually in a room with the stage manager and with your crew, and we did a run and paint that picture.
Oh, it was so good. Yeah, and it literally just felt like any other session where a director's sitting in, but it was at the record light who kindly gave that. Yeah, kindly gave the rehearsal space.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh no, yeah. Just that was really great, and they've got a massive hall that they've turned into a theater that they do shows in. They've got shows on happening right now, actually, this weekend. But being able to actually be into a space and have all the props there, like the vintage suitcases and the hat stand and the media wall behind it. And then like, hey, well, I'll just put my phone on a tripod, hook the phone up to my speaker system, and have a separate system to hear you, so you could hear me, but then also another system that played the music, so you could also hear the music, but I could also perform to the music. It took a little bit of work, but we got there in the end. But it was really great to be able to go through the motions, not just with just myself, but also with my team being there. And then I could just stop and go, hang on, what do you think? And then you'd be like, yes, do this, but maybe like this, or no, you don't need to do it like that. And then just on the floor, just working out practical problems to, silly solutions.
I think that was
it felt normal.
It's and I think maybe as well what made it acceptable, because I guess to the crew who just all of a sudden am dealing with the fact that they can't see me because I'm just on the phone. So there is a disembodied voice in the room that is given direction and talking and whatever. But because you and me had spent hours and hours developing a relationship through this digital form of jamming on ideas, and then sometimes you would try something out right there and then, and sometimes you would go away and test some stuff out in the meantime, or you did some of the material on gigs that you had along the way or whatever.
Yep.
So we had experimented with it so much, and that's one of the best things that came out of this pandemic is like what can actually be done via Zoom or Skype or on Messenger or whatever. It's quite surprisingly much, I think, and this is a great example where I'm just like a phone on a camera on a tripod, and and I can fully see what it is that you're doing and give notes. And then we sort of had that session, because I remember we did that session, and of course we don't have the time when your whole crew is there. You and me can't go through it. But then we had another conversation after that again about the show, where we really also felt like I just remember coming off after that second conversation when we talked about what we had just done. Yeah, it was just really quite electric of how it felt when we all like saw, because there was then like an audience. It was like your partner and the tech crew or whatever. So they were there sort of seeing it happening, and we could get some sense of how it all hung together when we all like, and I remember coming off that other one exactly feeling quite ecstatic, like, holy ghost, we just did all of this work and we had something good, but then we upped it. What was the revelations we had in that? Do you remember?
I think it was definitely to do with the old man, and how, like, with that idea that the old man invented the circus and he invented juggling. So he's the old Greek grandfather who thinks that everything has a Greek origin. So like one of my favorite lines that I put in there coming from my Certus thing is like, back when I invented the plates for spinning, and back when I invented the octopus, I also invented clapping.
Yeah,
and
that's
just
right.
Things like that. It just made much more sense. But I think that phone call was, I think we were both in the flow state and everything was falling in line, and every idea we had was a follow-up of the idea that came previously, and it was like building this wonderful pyramid. And there was no like, but what about this? It was all, these are all the possibilities that we can do, and these are the ways we can do them, and they're really great because of the method that we did from actually creating this. So if you want to talk a little bit about that method, well, I'd love to, because the way in which we created this show from nothing, well, essentially an old show into this show, A One Man Circus, I think that jam session, that form of jam that we had in every session, even though most of the stuff we didn't create didn't make it into show, we had all that stuff as a foundation.
That's exactly
right.
And
we understood each other. We understood both where we were coming from, because we have similar, from the street to the stage, doing all that sort of stuff. We speak the same language, like street and circus code. We know what we're saying. We understand theatre theory. And I think from knowing what the other person is saying truly helped not only our jam session, but when we really needed to nut out the actual flow of the show. I think that was really important.
I think it's what's really good is always to try to not jump into I'll say this line and then I'll do that line. So not get too concrete too early, but to spend that time talking about what do you actually want? What is your goal with the show? What is and we've touched on all that stuff, like how we both love family audiences, that you go to be thoroughly entertaining for the adults and the kids at the same time, and all this sort of stuff. So you had those things and you wanted more heart in it. We wanted for them to connect deeper to the character and put the finishing touches on all this stuff that you'd done, the work that you'd done on sharing more about your past and like your origin story or whatever as a performer and all that. So I think also that's like just having these conversations in the beginning of where you came from, what you're doing, and all of that allows me then to, when we're jamming, because I'm not just jamming on ideas that what I would do in my show or whatever, but by spending some hours, it's always based on talking about the act and talking about it. But in the beginning, I'm never so it doesn't have to be very specific. It's just more about a feeling of where do we go. So it's a little bit more abstract what we're talking about, and what's the aim of this act or whatever. And then getting the tune on each other on what we think about it and where we want the show to go. And also we worked quite a lot on what is the theme and trying to nail that theme down to a few sentences or whatever.
Because we
like,
had so many themes that we wanted to address, and we jammed upon. Like one of the themes was the Dr. Reg Bolton's theory of the five fingers representing, and the hand analogy for circus.
Yes, which is such a powerful thing.
Yeah.
And with so many things.
That. Yeah.
Yes, we jammed on so many things, and I think this goes back to that thing that I talked about, how I believe that all those things that you have thought and all those things that you believe yourself to be, that shines through when you're doing your act. I think that even though you never actually speak about it, then it still comes through. Like, I can't remember who said this, but about writing fiction, somebody said if you just have a proper, fully worked out picture of the room or the castle that you're describing, how it actually looks, you don't have to spend 2 pages describing it, because the castle will kind of emerge through every time somebody walks. If you're picturing a fully real place, then that will emerge from it without you having to specifically point out where the chair was in the room or whatever. Just for the actions from it, the people form that image in themselves. So there's something about that, maybe, that you that something greater emerges without you having to specifically spell it out. And that came, I think there's a similarity between that and how much we talked in the beginning, and aligning our ideas, and me aligning with what you want from the sessions as well. And all of those stories that you then told, whether it was about yourself or about the act or about like the acts that ended up in the show or not ended up or whatever, the fact that they're all there laid out in the beginning means that we know the pool to draw on, and any phrase or anything that you've said whilst we're looking for what is the theme of the show, what is the goal of the show, what is the audience's role, what do you want the audience to feel in the beginning and in the end, and haven't talked about all that stuff. It's almost like when we then look at the trajectory of the creation and we end up actually doing what we thought was like the more or less the final kind of thing, where you were on stage and I was directing from the phone and looking at you and giving comments. And then that conversation that came afterwards, where a conversation happened that left both of us ecstatic, so that after it was finished, you have to continue to text each other because both sort of are awake and going like, that was amazing. Like how, and then you can't quite, you don't know, not that you can't leave it behind, but that you don't want to, because really this flow state that comes when where all the stuff that comes before starts to make sense. And having seen you on stage, and then through each idea, one upping the next, and we have such a strong foundation that you really feel like, wow, like we're flying here. And that's not to say that that we hadn't had that feeling before, but that last sort of session just nailed it of this flow state that we're always kind of seeking, which is my definite happy place. Like when we're in good conversation and you just go, oh wow, this and this and that and this and that, and it's still within the realm of the possible, because you haven't actually done it yet, so it's still like an imaginative place. But all of a sudden when you say something, I immediately picture that thing and going, yes, 100%. Once the old man has said this line, the audience response will be this. And in this weird way, it's like we have jammed ourselves into the feeling of being in the show together, creating it, but we know how the audience is gonna react. So like it feels similar to the feeling that I have when I am on the stage and I'm interacting with the audience. The conversation with you starts to take on some of those same kind of feelings that I get when I'm on stage myself, and you're caught in that moment because I gotta make sense of my idea to you, and then you throw something at me like the audience would, and then I gotta be quiet and listen to that and incorporate that into us going forward together.
Do you know what it was? It was the interaction between the old man and Morgan James. That's why we were so ecstatic. So for this part of the show, we were just going to have like a old man puppet pop up while I'll live do the voice through my microphone and get changed into the old man from Morgan James. And then because I had this the first time we had it on the stage, and I had my crew member doing the puppet from behind the media wall, I just, as me being the clown, just started interacting with myself as the puppet. And then I think we both looked at each other and we were like, we had never really thought that Morgan James and the old man could ever communicate, because one was always off stage and it's just me doing it.
It was you playing both of the characters, but all of a sudden, because we'd sort of created this voice, it was now both voices had been spoken. One was your voice, your normal show voice, and one was the voice of the old man. And those had been set up so thoroughly that all of a sudden, just changing the voice made that there could be a conversation between these two characters. And that's exactly right. And that bit that happened there, from the puppet sitting on the top that was just going to roll down and then the old man was going to roll out, that bit, and so that bit and the bit where the old man, then having balanced the hat rack on his chin, turns out that he says, I can't even balance this hat rack here on my face. And then of course the kids, we egg them on so that they go, oh yes you can, and then he tries it and it turns out that he could. When he then leaves the stage again to introduce Morgan James, the other character, to come on, there's that was also like that second bit where there's now those two characters exist at the same time.
And they know each other, like, because Morgan James did hear the old man interrupt his show at the start of the show, and then Morgan James references that when they have a conversation. And we never really thought about it because I was always just going to live speak the old man voice, but it's like, well, we can pre-record it. We'll just pre-record the conversation and I'll learn the timing of it so I can have a conversation with the old man on stage and he can tell bad jokes and he can make fun of me, which is what he does anyway. And it was just like, oh my God, we had never thought about this and here it is. So then we, quickly wrote what he was going to say and how he was going to say it. And then I think the next day I pre-recorded it, showed you, we edited it a little bit, but it was all just like, yeah, no, he probably doesn't need to say that. He needs to say this instead. He can just make a joke here. Doesn't have to be too long, nice and simple, pops up, pops down, done. And it was just like, oh my God. Yeah.
But this is such a cool thing too, because you've heard both voices already, but then just to have the mix as well between you doing the old just popping your head behind the back wall and just shouting in the other voice. It's like, are you ready? Or you were just standing with your back towards the audience when you're standing facing the audience and like you doing the turning and shouting behind the screen so they can see you. But then when you're listening, you just turn your back or your head away from them and speak with the other voice, and they kind of know. But now you're in this sort of ventriloquist game, and then when it then swaps over onto a recording as well where the other one is speaking and it's clear that you're not talking, it just really beautifully blurred the game of that there's the old man. They kind of know, they know that it is you, but
it's a fake beard. And I remember in the beginning I was worrying, like we had quite a few jams on what do we do if the kids decide to go down this lane of like, oh, it's just you, or it's like it was you all along, or whatever. And as far as I remember, you were saying that didn't never happen. It happened once, but it was only a comment. We had planned for the kids rioting when Morgan James first comes on stage, being like, "You're the old man. You're not Morgan James. You're the old man." And then, or like when Morgan James or the old man comes back and be like, "You're Morgan James." We planned this, and we planned all the lines to say the old man would say, to be like, "Oh yeah, Morgan James does all that impossible stuff. Yeah, I can't do that because I'm old." And then just bringing it back to that character, and it just didn't happen. And we were both very shocked from doing that preview show the first night, and it was just like, wow, it didn't actually happen. And maybe it was a fluke, and then it didn't happen again. And I think it's just because we created specific rules for a specific game, and that wasn't the game that we set up. We set it up in your mind, but we didn't set up the call and response or any actions to do with them responding to, hang on, that's Morgan James, or hang on, that's the old man, or hang on, they're the same person.
That's right.
I think it was implied, and even
it's the flow.
5-year-old got that.
Yeah, and they, to be able to say that, like, because a real person with a real beard, and like they're going, we're at the circus, so they just accept you. It's also like it's a testament to how well you inhabited that character. When that old man came on, like they can tell this is not a normal person that just walked in. And that was the idea too. Like, he wears a red and white striped coat with tassels, and he's got the funny hat on, and he's got the not that funny, but a juggling kind of style bowler hatty kind of thing, and it's got a fake beard, or like it's got a large classic sort of theatrical beard, and the kids just go, "Yep, this is what happens," or whatever.
That's
like, and
the
they
show.
accepted that person. So when you left and you introduced the other person, you came running on as Morgan James. The music is pumping, and you're doing the act, and there was no point where they were invited into questioning what has happened, because there's a flow and everything is just following. The story is so simple that, and they are just following the plot of the story. Or like, you have introduced them, and then you walk out the back and tear off your jacket, and out runs this guy and starts a juggling act in a completely different style, completely different voice. And there was no, like, we were just worried, because it's always that when you're introducing a whole new character, and when that's not what you've normally done before, like to come out and behave and create a vocabulary of movement and reaction patterns that the old man reacts, and he did. He totally reacts, totally different than what the other guy is doing. His jokes are much more like dad jokes. He's much more corny, but that makes sometimes what we think of like as dad jokes or whatever, the reason why they are dad jokes is because they're jokes that the first time the dad tells them to the kids, then they are just hilarious because they haven't actually heard those jokes before or whatever.
Yeah.
So they are like, it's a great sort of, yes, anyway, I think that was also a lovely thing, that we got all that stuff that we'd developed that could be said or done in those cases wasn't needed, because the structure of the show was already strong enough.
Yeah, if Morgan James ran out on stage and went, "All right, now let me tell you all about the values of circus," and then just started doing a talky bit, they would have gone, "What's the game here? What's the game?" You're Morgan James, you're the old man, or the old man, and then but because we did the juggling straight away, boom, like that full
the hat routine,
it was all
the hat routine first, the old man, and then you come on and do a completely different.
When Morgan James comes out,
when Morgan James comes out, comes a high skill juggling act and not a clown act. No, that's so true.
That was really important.
I think that was very important as well, and I think that was that flow of where we just went. We thought we had everything worked out, and it would just be one character is here, one character is on stage, one character is off stage, and there's a little chat where you're poking your head behind and going, "Are you ready?" And he goes, "No, I'm not ready." "Okay, I'll just stand out here and tell some silly jokes then." But then that evolved into this beautiful thing where there was a back and forth with you on stage, and your own voice was coming on, so what was interesting was how then this is a one-man circus, and of course then in the end, when you do come back on again and you do keep introducing after we've actually heard the voice of the person behind the screen on the recording, and you've had that conversation with yourself, you introduce Morgan James as the old man, and then the big reveal.
Reveal.
Yeah, tell us about the big reveal.
So I as soon as we created this old man character, I definitely wanted to do something like this because it was just so silly. From going off where you started, the old man does a hat balance. He balances the coat rack because he's like, "Oh, I'm too old, I can't do this." And then the kid's like, "No, you can do it." And he's like, "Okay, well, I'll try." And then does it. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm really happy I can do the trick." And he's like, "Oh, are you ready for the finale of the show?" Morgan James is backstage, but he's very nervous. Like he's going to do this big trick, but he doesn't know if he can do it because it might be too impossible. So let me just go see if he's okay. Like, "Are you ready?" And then, he's like, Morgan James. "Oh, Morgan James. Are you ready to do the show?" "No, I'm not ready yet." It says he's not ready yet." "It's okay. I'll sort it out." "Well, what do you mean you're not ready?" I don't know." "Oh, what do you want me to do about it?" I don't know. Maybe do one more trick." And then the old man's like, "Okay, I'll do one more trick. I'll tell him the secret." Yeah, tell him the secret. That's what it was. Yeah, it's like, "Okay, I'll tell you one more secret, and then regardless of whether he's ready or not, we're gonna bring Morgan James back on stage. He's gonna do the grand finale. Okay?" "Okay, are you ready? Are you ready?" Are you ready for the secret? Okay, here it comes. It was me the whole time. Hit the music. Yeah.
That's right. Then you
And
tear
so
your jacket off and
I
you
tear
pull
the
your
jacket
beard
off,
off.
take the beard, and I play it as if it was the most magical thing they've ever seen. Very Vegas style, like you didn't know, playing into that. And I didn't know how well that would play with the kids. I knew it'd play well with the adults because it's so dumb.
Yeah.
But the kids loved it, and I loved it, and it was just a really nice moment when the old man's just turning his back. I like lock eyes with the parent, and they know what's coming. But when it happens, they still find it funny.
Yeah. Because it's that you've already had, and that what made us so elated about that final jam of the growth of the conversation, where you have the pre-recorded stuff, so that it really just expanded the levels of the two characters, and then to have that on stage transformation where you, and your audio wise too, you're just doing the old man, and then you basically just turn your back, rip your coat off, and turn around in like you just do a very slow pirouette or whatever, and then you come to the front and go, ta-da, it is me. It's also this like weirdly triumphant moment, but it's also this, now we can clap for both characters when we clap for you, because now you like you're acknowledging that it was you all along. You say it was you all along, and they knew that. So it's not that it's so, but now those two merge, and just the swapping of the voice, where you talking as the old man, and then you turn around again and you talk with your more normal voice or whatever, your show voice. That was also what you just said. It's like they know what's coming, yet it was more pleasurable and surprising that you kind of thought, because you haven't. Because you do see a realized life transformation. You stood differently and behaved differently, more sort of stooped or whatever. All those subtle things that you hadn't seen on stage, that there is an actual visual transformation between one character that you fully believe in and follow the old man's pattern, and you laugh at the cooler style of performance that the other character has, and then you see that transformation in front, and it does have this oddly magical feeling to it. Because
I think the beauty in it is because it is so simple. Because when we started jamming on these ideas, I initially went down that route of like, okay, let's do an actual illusion. Let's disappear the old man, or let's disappear Morgan James, and let's do some actual illusion stuff. So we did work around that a little bit, but then it just became abundantly clear that just, chucking my head off to the side of stage and speaking in a different voice was effective, dumb, funny, and just the best way to go about it. So we didn't need to make a big magic illusion, a big grand illusion, because I'm not a magician and I haven't done any. I do one magic trick. I haven't done any magic, so I haven't set myself up as this magician. I'm a juggler, and that's what I do. I'm a circus performer. So I'm not there to pull the wool over your eyes, but I am pulling the wool over your eyes because I'm pretending to be an old man. So I think
it's
simplicity in that makes
magic.
it easy.
Yes, yeah. So that because it does still have this oddly magical feel about it, because we have through theatrical conventions or whatever. This is now, because that was one of the things about the show here. Now this is much more theatrical, as in that there is a different level to the suspension of disbelief, that of what the audience at the game that you invite the audience into is a richer or more complex game than what you normally play, where you just come out, here's one act and I'm doing this, and here comes the other one, and it's the same character all the way through. Like the complexity of this is richer, yet the story being told was surprisingly simple, and they met the clown first. And that also is this great of having the low status character introduce the high status character that he sort of looks up to, or like will not look up to because he's still making fun of it. But in the beginning, it doesn't. When he introduces him to come on stage, it is actually like he's introducing a star, and that's also on a more abstract or meta level. It's funny to have you introduce yourself, which is the thing that we often do. Like before you go on, you give yourself a big hype before you go on, and then you come on and it's you that made your own introduction. But here you're doing it with a different voice from on stage and all this, and that's also funny in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I think that's well, I think you touched on it with that, the simplicity of certain things. All I remember is, or not all the only thing I remember. No, what I remember is when we were trying to figure out that last line before the double finale, basically, where it's like, okay, would you want to help me with one more trick, one more impossible trick? So the audience has to help me with an impossible trick, and we just needed to really. Now that Morgan James and the old man are combined, so it's Morgan James in the ringmaster costume with the old man hat on, so he's like double character. We needed to just really say the message without saying the message, but saying the message. And I remember we wrote a huge monologue that had all of the bits that we jammed on, and it made all sense, and it was really well written and perfect, but it went for way too long. So we had the whole bit about, you might go home and try to do something, and you might not be able to do it, and it's hard, and it's okay for it to be hard. There's many things in the world that are hard, and people say that are impossible to do, but if we don't try, then we'll never get there. So we're kind of implying a lot of global issues like climate change and all that sort of stuff, without saying save the world, hug a tree, buy an electric car. We weren't saying any of that, but what we were saying was all of these many different ways in someone's life that they can do something impossible, but we didn't have time to do it all.
But also like that, this is the approach that you take to the things where you're going, it's not going to be easy. It was that JFK speech about going to the moon or so. We're choosing to go to the moon and do the other things, not because it's easy, but because it is hard. And that's because it's the most exciting things to actually do. I mean, we're implying global warming and all, like accepting each other and all these sort of things and trying to get those. But that's right. I'd forgotten that we went down that lane and wrote this thing and then it was so powerful.
And then all we did, all we did to that, because we didn't have the time, was condense it to don't give up when things get hard. That's it. That's all it was. All of those things that we were trying to say were condensed into when things get hard, don't give up. It's your 10 commandments.
It's the when everything is boiled down and you just go, it's that. And you can explode that out, and the idea of doing a magic illusion where the old man turns into Morgan James or whatever, that's just rife for being put into another show one time, because now you've done that on stage transformation, and you know how well it actually works, that you can really come out through a box or whatever. But it was also, of course, that thing of going, if you then said this is a magic trick and I now do it, then maybe we would invite more of the or the kids going like, no, it's just you, we know who you are. But because you never said that this is a magic trick, there was no sort of angle for them to grab onto that aspect of it. It just wasn't part of the story. It was just, we're doing this game.
Truth.
We all know what's going on.
Yeah.
It was just speaking the truth. It was this guy, and then you transform, and then you were sort of jokingly or whatever say, it was me, I fooled you all. And then a little bit, that's the kids are kind of going, nah, you didn't really. But because you're just about to go into like one of your most spectacular things, it's the finale with all the plates and it's high energy and all this, then they just are swept away and get pulled into this finale of that person. And it's also that, because then without specifically, because I remember, I think we talked about this too. At some point I was doing an indoor, taking my canned speech after having done it in the tiny top and developed it in that real life to where it boils down, because you're doing it in front of real people 100 times during a festival. Then I wrote it for a stage show, which was much more serious. And I talked about also it's me and my dad and growing up and whatever. And then I wrote other stuff because to me that follow your dreams, it has all this connotations. It leads to all these ideas or whatever. And then I tried to bring some of those ideas out and tell people about them, and found immediately after just like the first preview that it's like, oh, no, it is stronger because you don't say all of those things. It's implied, and you can invite yourself into all those things. And to just give that one core thing of going, all I'm saying is when it gets hard, don't give up.
Yeah, because you don't have to spell it out for everyone, because everyone will put their own meaning into everything anyway. So, don't give up when things get hard. That could be learning the clarinet, God forbid, or, becoming a Formula One race driver, or, just learning how to clean a car, or just something like that, building a wall, making your bed, writing your name, doing your tax properly. It's literally everything. And, we all have our own individual challenges in life. And when someone just says, don't give up when things get hard, you know exactly what that means to you, because it's being said to you. But you don't have to go blah, 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 all these things. It's just, here it is. That's it. That's how I can juggle fire with a bag over my head.
Yeah, exactly. And which is so odd or whatever, but in that way it reminds me of like how in a poem, for instance, I'll often have that with Charles Bukowski or whatever, and when he writes a poem and you just feel like it's sort of a story that's being told to you in a condensed form, but then the last sort of few stanzas comes. It often happens in poetry, and all of a sudden those last things just makes you having to reevaluate everything that came before because of that. And when he says it, or when you say it in the end of the show, that don't give up when things are hard, it's on par with this thing of going follow your dreams or whatever. But the reason why it becomes so powerful is because you say it at that time in the show, so that even though this could be on a Hallmark card, it is not cheesy anymore, and it is not as abstract as all that when you say don't give up, because you've been so specific that it is about magic. But because of the life issues and age things that have been brought in, and because of all of what came before, when you say that thing, it resonates and it feels completely authentic. And it took us so long, and there was so much stuff talked and then it boils down to that, and then you go, wow, this is powerful when we realize that you can just say that really simple thing in the end. But even though it is simple, it is only simple if you take that thing out of context. But coming as the punchline of a whole show, that thing is a seed, and it just it grows in everyone's mind in its own way or whatever. That was what.
So then we went back and did all the work, like planting and also changing some of the seeds that we'd already planted to make sure that that tree that's grown at the end is what we wanted it to do. So I think having a collaborative process, working with you on that, and just working with someone in general on something like that, I don't think I could have done that alone. I think I could have thought about some of it, but I think you do need that back and forth with the understanding of each person. You need that conversation to be able to find those places and make sure that they're the right places. Because what we did is we did actually plant that tree at the end. But if you didn't plant those seeds in the right way, then it would have just been this weird shrub.
It's like we went. That's right. It's like you write the story through, and then you get to the end of the show in the script. But then we go through and we change it again. And each time we were going through it again and kept working on the different routines. And each routine, when you really delve into it, new facets of, because I always think as well, like one thing, I just used the analogy of a short story collection, but acts, when we're going into a process like what we did to make a whole show, it's also like a poetry collection, and a poem is different from prose. Like, it's the similarities between fiction and that, of course, but it's like a poem is the most essential kind of form. It is many things at the same time. It's not like this whole thing of going, oh well, we're going to analyze that poem and this is what it means, then you've misunderstood that poem and you've kind of killed it. It's going, because every analysis and the poems that are still alive now, or what Goethe wrote about Faust in the beginning of the 1800s, or Wordsworth or whatever, what they wrote, those poems speaks to us still because they are open enough for you to connect yourself to them now. And somehow being more specific, you're becoming less allegorical or so. And that's like now I'm losing the thread a little bit here, but like it's like each of the acts when we start in the beginning, see it as this multifaceted thing. And I don't know which elements that are already inherent in your juggling with the blindfold on, or the like just the whole thing of lighting the fire torches. Just the lighting of the fire torches became one of the strongest, most beautiful kind of images.
Yeah, and we can talk about that a little bit, because that was a really big sort of creation we did as well. So I've done that act before, where I juggle fire blindfolded, or I've got this hood that I put over my head. So you know with blindfolds you that only covers your eyes, but people can see through their noses and just absurd stuff like that. But what we really needed to do was implant, because this is the big impossible trick in the show. So we needed to have the lead up before that to plant that seed, and also kind of grow a bit of a tree there as well with the seeds we've already planted, to actually go, do you know what happened the first time I tried this trick? I failed. And then, okay, but what happened the next time? And then kids will go, you did it? And it's like, no, I failed. And then you make that into a game, failed, and then I failed a little less, which is that line we came up with, you have to fail at failing to become a success, and then the line was, you have to fail at failing to achieve impossible things. I don't even know my line anymore.
But it's like, you
got to fail at
so
failing.
Much,
yeah.
Fail so many times that eventually you can't fail anymore because you actually know how to do it. And then you realize that you are just starting to fail at failing. Yeah, there was a beautiful little that.
So here I am, failing at failing and achieve impossible things. That was the end of the monologue there. Yeah. But what we needed to do there was, instead of standing on stage just delivering a monologue, we needed to add some dynamism to it. So instead of just me pulling out fire torches and they're already on fire, because that's what I normally do for one of my little kid stage shows, I just light the fire and then I've got the fire and then I go, don't give up, and then I juggle the fire and then I finish. Whereas this one, we didn't want me to just be standing there holding fire for 2 minutes while I deliver the seed. So what we came up with, which was, I think, one of the early breakthrough moments of actually going through all the acts, with this act particularly, was this idea of it being a story. So come with me and I'll tell you a story. How did we build that? The start of that was like, do you want me to tell you the secret on how to achieve impossible things? Do you want me to tell you that secret? Well, come by my fire and let me tell you a story. So then I've already showed them the fire clubs and I've got a candle, because I was going to another absurd thing. So I was like, I'm going to juggle with the fire. So then the song Firestarter comes on and I pull out a lighter and light a candle and then dance around it with juggling clubs. And I'm like, I'm juggling with fire. And then it's like, no, I'll do it for real. I pull out the fire clubs. So I've already got that candle burning. So then I grab that candle and bring it down as I'm starting to tell this story, and the lights go down. So all you can see is my face with the flame, and I sit it on the ground in the middle. So I'm leaning down with my fire torches, with the candle, and the only light on stage is this candle on my face. So I'm bringing it all the way to the theater and all the way to the audience. And then slowly on certain lines, I'm lighting a fire club. And then I've got one, and so the light gets bigger, and I'm holding that fire club and I'm talking about that fire. And I'm also talking about this trick that I wanted to learn how to do and how I tried it. So I'm lighting another fire club. So now I've got 2 fire clubs, and now there's even more fire on stage. And I've got double wicked fire clubs. So they're actually quite big flames. And then I finally light that third one and I finish my story and I say, and now here I am, failing and achieving impossible things. And I blow out the candle and I've got the 3 fire torches. And to me, it was just that perfect harmony between something interesting happening on stage whilst I'm delivering lines, but I'm not juggling. I'm not doing the trick. I'm not doing the impossible thing. All I'm doing is lighting my fire torches, but I'm using that fire torch, lighting the fire torches as the metaphor for growing the story and growing that message, and then paying off with doing the impossible trick at the end. I thought when we jammed that, it just made so much sense, and allayed one of my fears. My fear was that we're going to have all these lines that I'm just saying to the audience, and it's going to take them out of the experience, and it's going to take me out of my character. But in doing something so benign as, all our street performers have done that, just you light your fire torches, and then taking that and making it into something was really, really great.
I remember that too, that being one more sort of breakthrough moment. And I had this image of like, we're sitting around a fire. Didn't you even say that? It's like, come, let me tell you a story.
Yeah, come gather around my fire. Yeah.
Come gather around my fire and let me tell you a story. That's just like, it's cheesy and kind of funny or whatever. And it's silly because you're carrying this little candle on a little candle holder or whatever, and you put it on the floor. So it's kind of funny. But then, but that is also what you're doing. You are gathering them around your fire. It's just a little one. It's very little. And then you're telling the story, which is like of how you learned impossible things. And it's not particularly sentimental or like nostalgic or whatever. It's basically almost as soon as you do it, it's like it continues to be fun for the kids. And you go, oh, you set up the game with, oh, and you know what I did? Oh, I failed. But then when I tried it the second time, what happened then? I failed. And then they go, no, now you could do it, and they don't know, and then you set up the game, so that even though it is a very beautiful and poetic moment where it starts with a small fire and it grows and grows as you do it, which is a beautiful image, and you're telling this story of going from just that little candle that of the spark that I want to do something impossible, and it is really fragile as you're walking to the front. That thing is flickering, and if you do a quick turn, then that thing goes out. But then you grow it into so you have a beautiful kind of metaphor of the going on here, which really resonates, of course, with the adults who can see these other sides. But it continues to be entertaining, and most importantly, like, it's just fun and enjoyable for the kids all the way through. You're being told this thing, but you're loving it along the way. And as the lights are going down and the fire that you have gathered them around to tell them a story is like a real fire. So there was no pretense or so. Like, it's a little bit of suspension of disbelief because you're inside or whatever, but you are actually speaking to them around a fire, and that leverage just this this feeling that people know. We have told stories around a fire. That's like part of why we are human beings, and to take that in something so big, but not just because we have this beautiful image, not to be lecturing and waxing poetically. It's also because that's not necessarily how that Morgan James character speaks in the rest of the show. Like, he doesn't speak like that. So for you to continue to be just like, it's still just fun and games, but you're looking at it and there's
but I'm leveling with them.
And that was really beautiful. Right. So that's probably we've done about 2 hours here now.
I think so. So let's talk more about Star Wars.
Getting back to what we all brought you here for, talking about
the actual point.
Anyway, well, you got any thoughts of something that you want to say before we start wrapping up?
Well, a great thing from this collaboration that we've done, making this show A One Man Circus, which won 3 awards and the overall award, by the way.
That's totally true. You won out of all of the shows at the Perth Fringe, you won Best Family Entertainment. Was that it? Or?
Best Children's Event is what it's called.
Best Children's Event. But that's what people call it a kids show, but they don't come alone to the kids shows. So for me, it's like, it's a family show because there's half of them are adults too.
And I definitely want to change that. I want them to change that award name because, in essence, most of the shows that are in that children's events section, they're family shows. And I think a lot of people need to put boxes in their heads of like, this is a kid show or this is an adult show, and there's no divide between them. And that's really what I'm all about, is literally that divide between them, that true vaudeville family show. But something really interesting to comment on this is that, one, we didn't really get a very good venue. Unfortunately, we got a double marquee with a stage on it, and I had a fantastic tech crew to do it, but the ceiling was very low, and it was very hot in there because it's also Perth Fringe is in the middle of summer. We also didn't really have much backstage. We had no backstage. We had two little side wings, and we had also written stuff for side wings, so we had to adapt it. So I've got that media wall, so things can happen behind that media wall. And also because of COVID, there was a lot of attendance hesitancy. So a lot of people, even though you were allowed to come and to go see shows, were very hesitant to actually come and see shows. So we had a couple of good shows that weren't nowhere near sold out, but the first show, the first show almost sold out, and the second show was about 80%, and then it kind of slowly went down and down and down to the point where, I did do this show to 8 people, and I think the lowest point was 6 people actually. So it was really kind of a bummer to put all of this time and effort into such a beautiful project. For when I've done Fringe in the past, like everything sells out. It's like it's Perth Fringe. People are hungry for it. People want to go and see it. Things sell out, or at least you sell lots of tickets. So this one didn't sell many tickets, but all of the judges came to this show, and I'm pretty sure the judges came to one of the shows where there wasn't many people. And towards the end of the run, people were starting to come again, so I was getting a little bit higher numbers, nowhere near even 50%. But I think it kind of speaks of volumes to winning the Critics Award and the overall family award, because I think the judges saw the point of this show. It wasn't just this Morgan James guy chucking stuff up in the air for an hour or being a clown for an hour. It was a true theatre show that was executed in a marquee, basically. And even though we didn't sell the most tickets in the world or even in festival, we managed to win that award, and I think it's because of all the work we put into it.
Yeah, I also, because you said, because Perth was, because they had a sort of hard border, they weren't letting people in and out. It's very hard to come in and out, and quarantining and whatever in regards to the pandemic. Then round about the time that this festival went, cases started popping up. So they had haven't had no cases at all. Like you said, there was a full lockdown early on because there was one case. All of a sudden there was cases happening around, and the state was sort of meeting it a little bit for the first time. So people became, when you say they were hesitant, it was kind of like, because it's just all of a sudden it's on the front page of the paper and it's just arriving and it's bigger news than it has been. So it was definitely a not a very beneficial sort of space, or like time to be trying to sell tickets and get people to come together or whatever. So that was,
and we knew that if just one venue in Fringe World Perth, if just one venue became a site, like a COVID site, we knew that the festival would probably just get shut down. Because you've got the garden there, the pleasure garden. You walk in there and then that's where all the venues are. You don't go into a separate area to go to a separate venue. It's all there. So if one person had COVID and came to see any show, the likelihood of the festival would have been very, very, very bad. And props to them, it didn't happen. No venues of Fringe, to my knowledge at least, had any COVID whatsoever. And it meant that people could come to the festival. So props to them.
Yeah, and but the good thing too, though, is that having gotten all of this great feedback, winning 3 awards, and it just all like rocking, all of that, leveraging it for next year, and the fact that there was a low attendance means that you could most likely stage this show one more time, and the people who saw it last year will see an expanded growing version of the show, and there's room for you to sell as many tickets as you normally do when we hopefully in January now get another Perth Fringe at its maximum potential. And that last year people didn't go off like they usually do during that festival, which is like notoriously exciting or whatever. Perth is very far away from everything, and the Perth Fringe is really a time when Fringe really, when Perth really lets themselves get thoroughly enthused and come out in droves to see shows and supports artists and wants to have a good time. So I do really hope, that the show will find.
Well, we're definitely going. We're just put in a submission for some touring. We want to tour this show for sure, because it is in essence a theatre show. It's not just a show that I'd chuck on a community festival stage or something like that. It's a theatre show, so we're making a lot of progress in setting up a theatre tour. So if you're a theatre and you're in Western Australia and you want a really great show, get in contact. Yeah. So we're doing that, but this show definitely isn't just a one-time event. It's definitely the culmination of every show I've made and every show I've done in my 20-year career. This is the cherry on top. This is the top hat on top of that, of all the shows I've done. And now I can create other things. And this is the pinnacle of that type of show. So Morgan James has now become a one-man circus. And he's always been a one-man circus, but now he is 100% a one-man circus.
Yeah. So exciting as well, though, like you were saying the other day, just in the text or whatever, that the old man might get his first sort of breakout gig, that he's going to appear as an MC or appear in another in the cabaret lineup or whatever, which is just so amazing, that something which you feel like is so specific that he's got several roles to play within the structure of the other one, but that character now is so strong that you can put them on stage on a bill with any other performers, and that guy is now like it's basically you finding a full outlet to all of those years where clowning has been in the cracks. Now that can go out and be on the center stage and be the glue that ties together somebody else's show as well, or like a bill of cabaret acts. It's so absolutely exciting for me, having been part of that, like pulling that character out of nothing into existence or whatever, and now he is getting gigs on his own, leaving Morgan James behind.
Well, he did invent the circus.
Yes.
So he invented the octopus as well.
Yeah.
And,
that's right.
Invented
right
plates
after
for spinning.
Invented clapping. Yeah.
That is super excited, and with that, because I would just MC the show normally. I am doing it as the old man, and for this one, I'm not actually going to prepare him any material. What I'm going to do is do my clown material that I would normally do as my character, but I'm going to chuck it into the medium of the old man and let him do it. And I think by just letting him do it, it's going to create all these other things that I can then add to. So that, like you said, like this old man, he can just come out and be a 10-minute cabaret act in any show now without much prep, because he is just a solidified character. Even if there isn't a twist where he's actually Morgan James, he's still the old man of the circus.
That's right. He's not just a setup for a joke. He is
not anymore.
Thing in itself. Like that's where he came from, with this twist of like he's doing like this was the core of it, but now he can totally stand on its own legs without ever revealing that you are or can also behave like another person or whatever. It's so cool.
Yeah, so we'll see how that goes. I hope it goes well. It should go well.
It will go well.
It's a really great lineup.
It will go well.
Australian artist. So, yeah.
Amazing. No, man, I'm so excited. It's been so nice to go on this journey with you, and the continuous sideline of being fanboys over Star Wars as well. So lovely.
It works very well.
It does. Good stuff. Great talking to you. Thanks so much for taking the time to do this.
I look forward to the next project.
Yeah, me too. Have a good one, man.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way indeed. This is the way is, of course, a reference to the dual nature of the way as the way of the Mandalorian and the way of the showman. So, as you can hear when the interview starts, it's not a normal interview. In fact, it isn't really an interview at all. It really is a conversation about two people trying to sort of sum up some of the things that has happened along a creative way that we've shared together. And it doesn't even start with me going, so I am here with Morgan James on the Way of the Showman podcast. So for all its flaws, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed talking to Morgan James. And if you like what I do here on the podcast, then it would be excellent if you could leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. That would be great. It would also be really excellent if you subscribe to this podcast. Just click subscribe wherever you get your podcast whilst you're there, putting the 5 stars in. Subscribe to the podcast and you'll get it in your feed, and you'll have it there for that long car journey when you're out of range from Wi-Fi or whatever. Anyway, if you're interested in working with me on some project, please contact me, and let's have some further conversations, specifically about whatever it is you are getting your creative excitement from at the moment. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and until next time, take care of yourself and those you love, and I hope to see you along the way.